Hi HR Nation, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world leading global brands. Today we have a special guest on the show. We're joined by David van Lochem, former HR executive and co-founder and partner at Thriveme. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Very well. Thank you, Chris, for having me. I really appreciate it.
So despite your accent, where are you joining us from today?
Despite my accent. So I'm actually joining from Dubai, what I consider my home now after 12 years. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, let's kind of start with the origin story and get to how you ended up in Dubai. Tell everyone a little bit more about your background and your journey to where you are now.
Right. So, yes, how I ended up in Dubai. Basically, my background is HR. So that's why we're here probably in the HR journey. But my background actually went slowly into technology, and sometimes I also want to tell a little bit about it because it's also maybe a good inspirational story for others to kind of like take an opportunity to change a career in a certain direction. So I back in 2006 I joined a company called Cognos, what is a business intelligence solution, and I was the HR director for Europe, Middle East, Africa for that company. And what happened was actually we got acquired by IBM, and I got actually the leads to integrate Cognos Europe, Middle East, Africa into IBM. So, and the interesting part was that they first gave me the leads from the IBM side. So instead of being the acquired party, you became the acquiring party in that sense. What is an interesting one in terms of like managing that trust. Secondly, the role was pretty broad, including setting the compensation plans for sales, talking about the territories, etc. Kind of like a very wide scope. And that project was actually very successful. We got about 1,000 people aboard on time. One person decided not to sign up, but you always have that one. So that's fine. So yeah, and then I almost left IBM, and then I got a call, and they asked me, "Do you want to come to Dubai?" And I worked a lot across Europe, mainly across Europe when I worked in Cognos, but also in other companies. So, but I never really lived abroad, and that made me decide actually to go abroad. And interesting enough, when I joined in a kind of like regional headquarter role. It was then surrounded by people from basically Germany, France, countries I already have worked with, and I didn't really enjoy it that much. And then not because I didn't like these people, but more like I felt like I was back where I came from. So I volunteered to become the HR director for the Middle East, and that was actually a very good experience where you have a multicultural team, so many different players. So many different cultures. You have the people singing Bollywood songs in front of you. You're getting involved in the cricket that you never got, and yeah, that was actually a great journey. But to kind of like continue that story, like how did I end up in technology? First of all, I worked a lot for technology. Secondly, I joined after IBM. I joined a company called Overto Technologies that later on became. And the story of my life is mergers and acquisitions, by the way. But later on became IDEMIA after I merged with the number 3 competitor, and that company is into payments, the fintech space, into mobility, and again very much around technology. And I believe that HR should be very close to business. And I got probably so close to business, some time that I got inspired to start my own company in robotic process automation. And I also joined a company called KPI Soft, and the proposition of KPI Soft was basically to apply predictive analytics on performance management. So basically, instead of looking back once a year, like what didn't go so well, the idea is basically that you start predicting what potentially doesn't go so well and what goes well, and you start acting on it. Mm-hmm. These insights should create these actions. So that was actually a very interesting start of my journey. I went to every webinar I could find about RPA, about AI. I started reading everything I could find on the internet. I did a training course in programming in Python for kind of like a short data science course, so you really understand what it means. And that kind of like led me to the continuation in my journey to become a bit of maybe an unusual combination of really data science technology. I'm really crazy about predictive analytics as well as HR, because I really believe in that strong combination as such.
Oh, it's more important now more than ever. So it's a good job you did.
You're so spot on. Yeah.
It's a good job you did. It's a good choice. And an area that many of the leaders that I speak to every day are struggling. So I'm sure they'd love that skill set. Like when was you going to say something then? Sorry.
No.
When was that moment though that you decided, you know what, I'm sitting in the seat as a HR executive, but I'm going to leave and start my own business?
That was basically let me think.
Was there a trigger? Was there a particular trigger that made you go, now's the time?
Yeah. Actually, the trigger was a little bit earlier. The trigger was first, I was on vacation in Bali and I met a guy who started his own business, and it was a very inspirational one, but that's more generic. But the main trigger why I really got so much into AI and RPA was because a former colleague of mine, and I consider her a friend from the UK, visited Dubai, and when we had dinner, she told me like people don't talk to me at birthday parties anymore. And I said, why? You're a lovely, bubbly person, so I don't get it. She said, because I work for a company and we provide bots, and these bots take over certain human actions, and people believe that we really take away their jobs. And I think every HR person should be always very curious and also very independent in terms of thinking. That's something that cannot really be happening, right? And that was actually the start of my passion and around going myself deeper into technology besides working for technology companies. And that also became a kind of the reason why I started Augmented Workforce. Mm-hmm. And Augmented Workforce has now more evolved into analytics. It started more as RPA, robotic process automation. But yes, it's all in that same space of HR tech, HR-related tech. Yeah.
So where did this new venture come from, Thriveme, and the connection in the well-being space? Like,
very good question. It's the pandemic, I guess. Although I was already in touch with my co-founder far before the pandemic, but the pandemic really, if you look at the pandemic, the distinction between private and life and business life has completely disappeared, right? And if you look at the number one trend where companies are focusing on right now is mental wellness. People are feeling Zoom fatigued. Maybe people look here now also online and you might get fatigued as well. I hope not. But reality is that a lot of people are getting digital stress. They're not focused anymore. They're having issues kind of like finding the balance between work life, private life. Some people gained a few kgs during COVID. So, where I used to say like the employee wellness was a primary responsibility of the employee, him or herself, and it was a kind of like nice to have for corporations to offer that. Reality right now is that I think it has shifted to at least a shared responsibility between the employee and the employer, and that companies are massively investing into wellness. And at Thriveme, we take wellness very holistically, meaning it's not only physical wellness, it's not only mental wellness. We also look at things like digital wellness, and even financial wellness, like how do you survive on a salary? But especially here in this part of the world, in Dubai, we have a lot of people. We always think about five-star hotels. Everybody's rich. Reality is there are a lot of people that are really having a hard time surviving and struggling to make a living.
Mm-hmm. So is it an app? Is it a tool? What does it consist of?
Yes, it's an application. And the application, actually, our philosophy is, and this is where my technology background comes back again. First of all, we provide content like videos, like we have an online health check. We have live events, etc. So we really try to improve the wellness of employees. But to give you an example, when I worked for the company called Idemia, we were doing yoga sessions in the office, and everybody was waving like this. And I never knew if it really helped or not. It was kind of like nice to have. And what we really do differently is that we believe in the power of data. So we have built in a lot of connections with wellness devices, watches, etc. And the idea is basically that if you look at the medical insurance business, for example, in the Middle East, your premium is determined by your claim history. If you look at last year, claim history doesn't mean anything. And in reality, if you really look into lifestyle choices that people make and lifestyle habits that people have, that gives a far better prediction in terms of like real risks. So in the future, our app will have opportunities to measure, to collect data around oxygen level in blood. It will be blood pressure. I know the future watches will have more blood pressure readers. For example, blood pressure can be an indicator for risks around, let's say, cancer, stroke, a lot of things. And I can tell that actually from my own experience as well. I ended up seriously in hospital and probably would never have been able to have this conversation earlier. And I know that there were certain indicators active that could have prevented it. And then this is medical, and we're not a medical company or anything like that. But there are also other lifestyle diseases or risks that you can retrieve from the data that you collect. So our idea is really provide good opportunities for wellness, use the data to improve your wellness programs, and then on the back end of that, maybe you can even negotiate a better premium with your medical insurance or your life.
Yeah, I was about to say that would be one of the benefits, right? That if you're and that's already happening in certain countries already. If you're healthier, if you're a non-smoker, for example, you'd have a better better price.
Absolutely.
For your insurance. Do you see a future where we would have like a P&L of the well-being, the same way we have a P&L for the financial stability of a company? You would have a P&L to be able to measure the well-being of your employees. So you kind of like an employee well-being P&L where you can see the data of where are we, and is there peaks, right? Is there peaks during these months of where our well-being, dips, etc.?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Well, maybe not a P&L, to be very honest.
I shouldn't say a P&L, but you know what I mean.
It's more like yes, the amount of data, like the way you, for example, measure, like a lot of companies are measuring employee engagement with far more frequent pulse, kind of like surveys, etc. I think you will have the same when it comes to statistical employee wellness data.
Exactly.
And I think you will find that in the dashboards and the insights that are produced in companies.
Yeah.
For sure.
I was saying it in the sense of should be held as just as important as that. When you're sitting down with the executive team and they're looking at the P&L, looking at the sales data, that is a stream of data they should be focusing on with just as much as importance.
Well, look at it as an individual. Your health is at least probably more important than your wealth, right?
Health is wealth.
That's true as well. Yeah. Like financially, you can be very rich, but if your health is nowhere, then there is no point in the end. So
yeah. How I think some companies are doing very well during this period. Some are struggling. Speaking to your clients and also your colleagues, what are some good ways you're seeing companies create a culture of well-being and care?
First of all, I believe it should really kind of like come from not only HR but also from business. Like ideally, you should have a CEO or a COO or somewhere in the business where they have the same mindset as you have. Like we almost need to have a P&L of our employee wellness and well-being. I think that's an important criteria. Secondly, to take it out of the nice to have into kind of like a need to have in that sense. And you do that best with data. So we all know that, or we all, I wouldn't say no, but we can reasonably assume that healthier employees that feel better, they're also more effective and they perform better. So if we kind of like can support that thesis, then you will get it. The other thing that is really important if you talk about wellness is communication. Pick up even with whatever application you're using or whatever kind of like beautiful technology you might want to implement in your company to support the wellness of employees, your communication, your enthusiasm, the way you will normally drive any cultural change or is as important with this one as well, because there's no point if you only reach 10% of your employees, what often happens.
Yeah, and a lot of times employees don't even know they exist. They have these great access to these great tools. So many of my friends and family throughout the pandemic were like, oh, I didn't even know we had that. Like access to these assistant programs beforehand, because, you know, and now they need them now more than ever. We need to make sure we're constantly communicating that to people. But also it needs to be in a way where people, you know, companies try so hard to bring employees to them rather than go to them, in the sense of like, no one wants to log into a intranet and try and find, you know, links to these tools and applications. It doesn't work that way.
No, I mean, the same way as now in HR, we all talk about the employee journey and the instead of user experience, the employee experience.
Yes.
I mean, this employee experience needs to be reflected in whatever tool you provide. And that applies, of course, for tools in generic in HR. I mean, there's so many tools right now and apps and stuff coming up. But for sure, also in wellness, it needs to be really employee-centric. In that way, the journey needs to be there. It needs to be appeal to people. And that's what we're trying to do as well. We work a lot with local content providers that kind of like reflect the demographics of the organization. There's one guy that has a six-pack we work with a lot, but honestly, I don't have a six-pack either. I try to cycle hard and do my own best. Like it's you need to be able to relate to the content and appeal to people in that sense. Yeah,
I'm sure you get a lot of questions around the ROI. Like, how are you measuring the ROI of well-being? Because a lot of companies are spending tons of money right in this space, especially over the last 18 months. And also I'm seeing companies like your own, not exactly like your own, but many companies in the world pop up. So many well-being tech startups, like every day I like kind of get contacted by 3 or 4 as well. So like, how are you demonstrating the ROI to these organizations?
Yeah, I mean, you come back to the point, of course, that you need to have data in order to demonstrate that. So you need to start somewhere, right? It's a bit of a catch-22. So, but once you start measuring, you can show certain changes. You can show, for example, if let's say we all know that being overweight is not a very good thing. So you can measure that relatively easy in an application, or especially with smart scales, people don't even need to manually enter it. Or sleeping, for example, we know that some people can sleep 4 hours a day, but we also know that if you normally sleep 4 hours a day, for most people, it means that they're less productive during work time. So once you start measuring that statistically, and you can see, like, because you put more focus on on wellness, mental health, making sure that people feel energized, you can probably see that the same trend happening in your performance, in your business performance. But you need to start somewhere. You need to first start measuring that wellness data, because otherwise, how would you prove the change in?
And over time is where you could do a bit more modeling, right? When you have the more data you have. So it takes
the more data you have, the better you can predict. That's kind of like the interesting. Sorry, I get very enthusiastic about this point, but like that's a misunderstanding. A lot of people have. A lot of people think that AI is so much all around us right now and predictive analytics because of the tools or the algorithms. No, it's really the data.
Yes, you need quite a big set of data to make that work. As
absolutely.
well. Yeah. What you've both been a practitioner on the inside and now obviously speaking to them externally as a founder of the company. What advice would you give to our listeners about how to turn the C-suite into champions of data? Because if they're not invested and they're not champions of data, it can become very challenging.
Right. Yeah, I don't. Let me put it this way. I think that David Green, most people that are in people analytics, they know him,
Mm-hmm.
and Don Farrar wrote it very nicely. And it's starting with the business problem. So I think what you kind of like, instead of pushing the data and pushing your insights, and if you have learned how to use Power BI or Tableau or whatever tool you're using, it's not about showing that off. It's really starting with understanding where is there an issue, and if you can even start solving a small problem with data, with insights, I think that's where what really would make the difference.
Mm-hmm. And you're right, you don't need flashy tools. You can do that in Excel
Yes,
early on. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, start small. I mean, start with something, and then, yeah, a lot of people think that it has to be all kind of like massive, etc. No, start with data visualization, make it more insightful. I mean, not we all know, but like there are different levels of analytics. You don't need to be in predictive or prescriptive analytics to start working with it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like prove that there is value in analyzing data. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think? Because we've, people talk about the future of work, and now we've kind of leapfrogged forward like 5-10 years because of the pandemic, right? I think we would have got to where we are at some point, but this has fast tracked many things. And one of the silver linings is this spotlight and focus on well-being. It's now on the agenda, right? It's not just, like you said, it's not like a nice to have. Companies are really investing in it. But what do you see? Kind of the future of well-being, what do you think that's going to look like from a corporate well-being perspective? Or what do you hope it looks like in the future?
I hope that it becomes a benefit, or not even a benefit, but like the same way as you receive salary, that this is kind of like part of the overall offering of an employer. And it's not, I mean, there are certain things that you can get maybe also outside, but when you think about it, if you take mental wellness, for example, mental well-being, leaders play a massive role in the mental well-being of employees. I hope that somehow that this all gets more integrated into like it relates back basically to what we try to do as HR as well. We try to create better leaders so that they can manage their people better, and that they that organizations perform better, and that all the stakeholders are kind of like benefit from that. So I hope that this well-being becomes really integrated and no longer nice to have. There are not so many companies that have a dedicated wellness department or employee wellness department. Some of them do, the largest ones probably, but not all of them. This is also where we sometimes step in, and that we offer a package and take over. But I really
You think that's a problem though? Because when you create a well-being department, you're sending the signal that it's not a business issue. It's like that department. It's like with D&I, right? Like DE&I, you kind of create a diversity and inclusion department or, leader. All of a sudden it's their problem.
A very fair comment. I mean, it's a bit of a dilemma, because if you don't do that, because often what you see is well-being is part of for example, a side activity of the head of talent or the head of the HR business part, or somebody that picks it up out of an interest.
Yes.
If you're not consistently doing it, if you're not consistently put it on the agenda, organize activities, stimulate people to work on it, monitor it, measure it, etc., it will not help. I mean, starting up is so. In that sense, I think you need to have dedicated resources. At the same time, you're right. You should put it in a proper position in the organization and try to embed it in the leadership style. And that's kind of like, when you ask me how would you like to see it, I would like to see well-being and a kind of like being savvy in how to properly manage the well-being of your employees in the mindset of managers, in the same way as they have, for example, financial knowledge and maybe some technology knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that would be the ideal world. Maybe not for companies like us, because if everybody becomes an expert, then what are we doing? But I think the
No,
reality
you're
is,
the foundation and the backbone for them to have those conversations. So right,
yes,
so like,
I really do this because I really believe in it. Really believe in it from a people perspective, that will really make a change in the world. Me and my co-partner and the people that we work with.
yeah, I think like we all realized how important it is to have that skill set, because that is a skill, and as leaders, I think many of us, including myself, are not prepared to have those conversations, or to have a team where you have people in your team suffering with mental or physical well-being issues, and we've never been trained of how to deal with that. I didn't when I was trained to be a manager. That was never part of the conversation or the training or the workshop as well. So you see many companies now doing mental health first aider training with all of their leaders, and that's a lot more common now. And understanding, the right questions to ask, and also understanding you don't have to have all the answers. Because as leaders, we feel like we don't have the conversation because we're worried about not being able to answer the question, right? But it's like, that's not the point. They just need to, be able to, you can signpost them or, help them in other ways, to other resources. So it's a big shift.
Yes, absolutely. And it also taps into what people call a safe place. People need to feel comfortable to voice out, because that also relates back to like well-being, etc. So yes, well-being as such is pretty broad and taps into a lot of different elements, like we discussed.
Yeah. Well, you're right. It kind of needs a rebrand, right? Because if you talk about mental health, immediately people are like, oh, mental health, Whereas if you spoke about physical health, people were like, no one feels positive, or no one feels negative if you talk about your physical health. Like, whereas if you speak about mental health, immediately there's this negative connotation attached to it. And that's why most people don't speak up. And I was one of them as well. So I do think we need to destigmatize. That the word mental health itself has just been, we need a rebrand of that as well.
Actually, I agree with you, because a lot of people take that, like if you talk about mental health, people think about in terms of mental diseases,
but it's not the point. Mental health is like, actually you should more think about like, how can I become more energized? How can I be more focused? How can I become more positive about myself, my organization? How can I contribute better? How can I help my family better? All these kind of things. It has nothing to do with, or it can have something to do with mental health issues, as you probably think about. But like, in reality, it doesn't need to be like that. It's like how we don't go to the gym because we have a broken leg. We go to the gym because
that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it, because I think for the longest time myself, I thought this is just life. Like, there's nothing I can do about this. I have anxiety, I have panic attacks, and that's it. That's it. I live with it. Whereas you don't think about the same, you can go to the gym and you can run and you can get physically fit. And I think most people, hopefully up until recently, didn't think there was another way. And the same way you can work on your physical health, you can do the same thing for your mental. And it's okay, right? And we now realize that this is in itself a pandemic within a pandemic. And it's not just yourself. Like since I started speaking about it, some of my closest friends, family members, colleagues, customers, I'm like, oh wow, so I'm not alone. It's there's a lot of people out there that are also suffering, but no one wanted to say anything.
I really appreciate you speaking so openly about this topic, and I hope it inspires other people to be that open
as well, because you cannot cut it out of this podcast. And it's really good for people to know that there's nothing to do with, you're very successful in what you do. And so your mental health issues were just something like you said, like this is where you need kind of like help to get out of it, because you're a good human being and you have a lot of potential.
Yeah.
And I think that's very good.
I appreciate that. So that was one of the surprises, actually, is some of the most high performing people that I respect and look up to were the people that in many ways are suffering the most. They were very high performers, even, one of them's, a multi-millionaire, sold multiple companies, like people that you would look at and you'd be like, really, you? Like, and that was one of the big surprises for me. Like, actually it was the majority of people that I spoke to that were suffering were the high performers, who are just in stressful roles, running a business, and then just they were doing everything but focusing on themselves. They came last in the order. So that was quite a surprise to see that. Yeah, and I think that's also what encouraged me to speak about it. Where I was like, if those people were speaking about it, and I see them as very successful and amazing, then it makes sense to have that conversation as well. Before I let you go, where can people learn more about you if they want to connect with you personally? I know you do a little bit of consulting when you have a small bit of time because you're a very busy man. Where can they connect with you if they want to learn more? And also, where can they learn more about the business?
Yes, of course. So I'm pretty well connected on LinkedIn. I think that's how a lot of people find me. So please follow me on LinkedIn. The other element is that the websites that we have will also provide a lot of information. So with Thriveme, augmented workforce. But I also would encourage, sorry, Chris, to download the app. The app is on the App Store.
Nice.
Thriveme, and let people try it out, and let's work on our health. And mention, if you are in HR, you're probably empowered to make some push. Otherwise, ask your HR, and let's all work on a healthier future.
Amazing. Well, look, thanks for taking the time to join me. I know it's pretty late where you are in Dubai, but I appreciate you tuning in. And for everyone listening, all of those links to connect are to David and the app. They're all in the description below. So make sure you click on those now and check it out. Apart from that, I wish you all the best, David, and I look forward to chatting again soon.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Chris. Have
Thanks.
a good day, and thank you all listeners. Thank you.